On the 25th of March 3019, Aragorn and his 6,000 strong host of the West arrived before the Black Gate to face the armies of Mordor, but all of this was just a distraction, a way to get Sauron to focus his attention somewhere else to give the ring bearer a better shot at getting the One Ring to Mount Doom. And it worked. Sauron unleashed his strength upon the host of the West, only becoming aware of the plan to destroy him at the very last moment, when Frodo claimed the ring in Mount Doom. So in this video, we answer the question, why did Sauron fall for Aragorn's trap? Now, to be fair to Sauron, we don't get his perspective during the War of the Ring. The only time we get an idea of what he might have been thinking about is when characters in the story make an assumption about it. In the case of characters like Gandalf, Aragorn, or Elrond, I think these assumptions should be taken with a fair amount of legitimacy, because in several cases, Sauron did behave predictably. But we also have to understand that Sauron did not have the same access to information that we, the reader, have access to. For example, like I said before, Sauron had no idea about the plot to destroy the One Ring, and as I've said in another video, the one about why Sauron didn't guard Mount Doom, it's something Sauron couldn't even conceive of. He assumed that, naturally, anyone who had the One Ring would simply try to use it for themselves, as he could not conceive of anyone willingly throwing away that power. And to be fair to Sauron, he was right. In Samath Noir, no being, perhaps except one that was higher than Sauron, could have willingly tossed the One Ring into the fire. It required an intervention of fate, Gollum slipping, to cause the One Ring to be destroyed. But surely Sauron had to know that something was up, right? Because at the Black Gate, the mouth of Sauron presents Gandalf Frodo's mithril coat. Sauron knows that a halfling has been captured at Cirith Ungol, clearly trying to sneak into Mordor, and he also knew that the One Ring was in the hands of a halfling named Baggins, and that the One Ring was travelling southwards towards Mordor. Sure, when Frodo was captured, the One Ring wasn't found in his possession, but Shagrat and Gorbag, the orc captains who found Frodo, were certain that Frodo wasn't alone, and if Shagrat's report to Sauron was complete, then Sauron would have known that at least one other spy was loose in Mordor. The problem for Sauron at this point is that he had already been led down a false trail. The last accurate information that Sauron had apparently was that the One Ring was travelling southwards down the Anduin in the hands of a small company. This is why the Fellowship was attacked at Amon Hen by 3 different groups: orcs from Moria, orcs from Isengard led by Ugluk, and orcs from Mordor led by Grishnark. Unfortunately for the orcs, they captured the wrong halflings. Merry and Pippin did not have the One Ring, and Frodo was able to safely get across the Anduin into Emyn Muil. But as far as both Sauron and Saruman knew, the orcs had captured the right halflings. Grishnark had orders to take the halflings across the Anduin, and Ugluk had orders to take the halflings back to Isengard. And unfortunately for Grishnark, Ugluk's Uruks were more formidable and easily won the brief fight between them. Although Grishnark and his Mordor orcs attempted to part ways, they were forced to rejoin Ugluk's company when they started being pursued by Eomer's Rohirrim, and all of them were killed at the eaves of Fangorn. Although Saruman was aware that the mission to retrieve the One Ring had failed, Sauron was left in the dark. Saruman certainly wasn't in contact with him by this point, because Sauron knew that he was a traitor. As far as Sauron knew, Saruman had taken possession of the One Ring, which would have been a huge disaster for Sauron. This is why he dispatched a Nazgul towards Isengard after about a week of silence. He needed to know what was going on at Isengard, and whether Saruman truly now had the One Ring. Except even before the Nazgul reached Isengard, Pippin used the Orthanc stone, the Palantir. Sauron naturally assumes that it is Saruman and begins by saying, "So you have come back, why have you neglected to report for so long?" But once he realizes it's a hobbit, he rapidly changes his tone. "Wait a moment, we shall meet again soon. Tell Saruman that this dainty is not for him. I will send for it at once. Do you understand? Say just that." The reason for this is because Sauron believes that Saruman now has the One Ring, and is proving it to him by showing the hobbit that he has captured. The Nazgul that flies overhead shortly afterwards obviously doesn't know about this interaction, but he sees that Isengard has basically been destroyed, which means Saruman can't have the One Ring. But before he can return to Mordor and report on his findings, he receives another call on the Palantir, this time from Aragorn, who reveals Anduril, therefore revealing himself as the heir of Isildur. When the Nazgul returns to Mordor and reports on the destruction of Isengard, Sauron makes a wrong assumption. Yes, while the One Ring was in the hands of a halfling, it now must be in the hands of the heir of Isildur, and he has used the One Ring to destroy Isengard and overthrow Saruman. This aligns perfectly with Sauron's original views. He always assumed that his enemies would use the One Ring against him. When it was going down the Anduin, he probably assumed that it was going to go to Minas Tirith, but it's taken a detour to Isengard and is now in Rohan. This is why he brings forward his invasion and attacks Gondor and the rest of the Westlands only 3 days later. He's worried that, given enough time, the heir of Isildur could use the One Ring to rally a significant amount of forces against him. Aragorn later acknowledges that he may have revealed himself too early, as yes, even though Sauron attacked before all of his forces were ready, his attacks gave Aragorn only a small window to reach Minas Tirith. For Sauron, Aragorn's successes afterwards could be perfectly explained by having the One Ring in his possession. We're not sure if Sauron knew about the Oathbreakers, but what he did know is that Aragorn managed to destroy the Corsairs and seize their fleet. This was one of his main weapons. He then used that fleet to sail up the Anduin, arrive just in time at Pelennor Fields when it should have taken him at least 2 days longer, and then destroyed the Morgul host there. Against any logical odds, Aragorn had succeeded in a huge way, so for Sauron, the One Ring must have been the reason. But this frightened Sauron. At the last debate, Gandalf tells us that Sauron would now be worried and might go into his shell and wait for the One Ring to destroy his enemies from within. This isn't what Gandalf wants, because if Frodo was going to get across Mordor, then Sauron and his forces need to be preoccupied elsewhere. So at Gandalf's advice, Aragorn does everything in his power to make it seem like he is already delusional from the One Ring's power. Firstly, he marches forth with only 7,000 men, despite being able to march forth with around double of that. And secondly, wherever he marches, it's loudly proclaimed that the King of Gondor has returned. From Sauron's perspective, he sees his self-proclaimed King of Gondor with a small army marching forth to challenge him at the very gates of Mordor, and as Aragorn wanted, Sauron would believe that Aragorn was blindly trusting in the power of the One Ring as some sort of superweapon that would easily allow him to overthrow Mordor. Obviously, Sauron is well aware of the limits and capabilities of the One Ring, and knows full well that an army of 7,000 isn't a real threat to Mordor. Sauron also doesn't suspect a trap, because what could the trap possibly be? He's watching all of his enemies' movements through the Nazgul. He knows Aragorn doesn't have some mighty secret army waiting nearby. So in order to goad Aragorn forward, Sauron begins preparing his own trap. He doesn't offer any resistance at Osgiliath or the Crossroads. He only attacks the host of the West in Ithilien, but it's not a powerful force, and notably, it attempts to ambush the host of the West at the exact same place Faramir's rangers ambushed the Haradrim. So obviously, the ambush is spotted, and the ambushers become the ambushed. Aragorn suspects that Sauron was giving him an easy victory here, to both feign weakness, and to also build Aragorn's pride and sense of invincibility. Even before the Black Gate, Sauron doesn't offer battle. He wants Aragorn to put himself into a position where he can't possibly escape from. He even sends forth the Mouth of Sauron to engage in diplomacy, offering ridiculous terms, and more than likely unfaithful terms, that Aragorn was obviously going to reject. And when the terms are rejected by Gandalf, he closes the trap. A massive army emerges from Mordor, but also from the hills on either side of the Towers of Teeth, and an army of Easterlings appears from the east to cut off any chance of retreat. In that moment, Sauron would have believed that the One Ring was again within his grasp, and victory was assured. And, funnily enough, the host of the West, or at least those who witnessed the discussion with the Mouth of Sauron, would have believed that they were doomed, because even though only Frodo had been captured and the Mouth of Sauron had only mentioned one prisoner, he had also presented Sam's sword because Sam had taken Sting. So as Sauron was believing that he was close to his ultimate triumph, his enemies were now believing that they were about to face their blackest defeat. Sauron believed his trap had worked, Aragorn believed his trap was now for naught. In the end, both were wrong, and Sauron only had moments to come to terms with it before everything he built came crashing down. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, or at least found it interesting. If you want to know more about why Sauron didn't protect Mount Doom and why he didn't think anyone could possibly destroy the One Ring, I did a full video on that too, and it should be appearing now in the end cards. Honestly, I have to say that I think this is a part of the narrative that was very well put together, and even though Sauron literally knew that there was a halfling in Mordor, it also makes sense why he thought Aragorn had the One Ring. Cheers, farewell, and remember, if you ever feel bad for not considering all possibilities, don't worry, because Sauron, an immortal demigod, didn't do that either.